Hi, you guys. Long time no. Well, I don't see y'all, but talk. I guess we're not talking. You're listening. Whatever. Hey, this is Unit 6, Context of the Speaking Environment. So this is pretty appropriate timing because, as y'all probably noticed, a lot of people with the coronavirus have had to turn to FaceTiming and Skyping and all these electronic methods of communicating with each other. And so, ironically, this unit is going to cover just that and much more. So, at the end of this unit, y'all will be able to discuss the various formats, locations, and tools available for different speaking occasions and apply tips for maximizing the environment when delivering a speech. So let's go ahead and get started. First things first, what is context? So the core idea of any kind of oral communication is how do I communicate who I am and what I think in a way my audience is going to understand. This is really, really important because y'all have a lot of awesome ideas and thoughts in your head, but how are you going to communicate them in a way that we're going to really get? Y'all already kind of had a taste of this with your demonstration speech, because you had to realize, okay, I'm really good at this thing, but how do I talk to my audience about that? Another example I always think of is I took this geology class in college, and it was supposed to be really easy. We called it Rocks for Jocks. Not that athletes are dumb in any way. All of you are very smart. But just some college athletes get to take easier classes so they can focus on their athletic career, and that's fine. But it was supposed to be an easy class, but this lady comes in and clearly knew a lot about rocks and volcanoes and whatever, but she just did not know how to talk to a bunch of college kids about it and make us give a crap about it and be interested in any way. And so that was really difficult. So she didn't really understand a certain area of context that she was needing to take into consideration as she prepped her lessons. And so for y'all, for any kind of speaking that you do, you want to make sure you think about, okay, how do I communicate what I want to in a way that my audience is going to really get? And so for that, we need to understand context. Context it means the circumstances that form the setting for an event, statement, or idea, and in terms of which it can be fully understood and assessed. You'll have probably heard like, okay, well, that's taken out of context 1,000 times. Like if I'm sitting here in the living room with my husband and he is like just being annoying, I go, oh, you're so annoying. I hate you. It's like, okay, obviously I know I hate my husband. I love him. But like if I just like wrote that down on a piece of paper and you're like, oh, Mrs. White said to her husband, I hate you. You're so annoying. That would make it seem like I hate my husband. But in context of situation, you're like, okay, there's being goofy and there's being silly and just said that. So context is really important for us to make full sense of something and to create full understanding of it. These two articles are great examples of how y'all have probably heard 1,000 times, like people take the Bible out of context. We've all done it, Christians and non-Christians alike. So I want y'all to pause this video and go read these articles. They're really great examples of, well, this phrase, it's not even in the Bible, and the I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, because it's not actually what that really means. So either stop the video and go read those articles now, or just read the articles at the end of the video. They're really interesting. They're really informative and can give you a good grasp of what context is. It's also good for real world application because people inevitably are going to approach you and be like, okay, well, the Bible says this weird thing. And then you can be like, yeah, well, you're a dummy. No, you won't say that. You'll say instead some nice informed response about context. And so read the articles, they're helpful. So either pause the video and read them now or read them later. Doesn't matter to me, just please read them. So, knowing the context, it is going to help you know what content to share and also how to share it with your audience. And so there are 3 areas of context that we're going to be talking about. First is what's the purpose? Next, who's in the audience? And finally, what's the setting? Y'all have already dabbled in quite a few of those already, but we're going to go really in depth with a few of them and learn about a new one entirely. So let's look at these 3 pictures and try and figure out which of those 3 areas of context goes with which picture. So again, our areas of context are purpose, setting, and audience. In the picture on the left, it says Michael Scott delivers a speech informing his audience on how to properly perform CPR. Then in the middle, it says members of a corporate branch in one location share a presentation with members of a corporate branch in another location. And then third, it says a teacher prepares to share the puberty talk for boys with his young male students. So go ahead and pause the video and try and figure out which area of context goes with which picture. Hopefully you paused it. If you didn't, I'll just go ahead and tell you now. So the first picture, that area of context is purpose. So this kind of looks a little bit like the beginning of a SPS or a thesis statement. It says he delivers his speech informing his audience on how to properly perform CPR. So he's to consider the context of, okay, why am I doing this? Why am I giving this speech? Oh, it's to inform. That's my purpose. In our next picture, the context that needs to be considered is the setting. As they are preparing their meeting and their message, they have to understand and be like, okay, our audience is not physically in the room with us. We have to take into account that we have electronic devices in here to project our message. So I have to take into account the setting of their speech. And then finally, the audience is an area of context that must be considered. So if you're going to give the puberty talk to somebody, you got to make sure you consider your audience, because I remember someone told me a few years ago, but they said when they were in elementary school, their school accidentally started showing like the girl puberty video to the boys, and it scarred some of them for life. And so you got to make sure, like, okay, who's my audience? What kind of content would I share with them? How am I going to share it with them? So it's very important to know. Let's do some more examples. So first, it says a teacher prepares a lesson on elementary math for her young students. Then in the middle, it says President George W. Bush delivers a eulogy at a funeral to celebrate the life of Ronald Reagan. And then on the right side, it says Martin Luther King Jr. delivers a speech to civil rights supporters from the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. So again, go ahead and pause the video and try and see if you can figure out which area of context goes with which picture. Okay, I hope you paused the video. So first, the area of context is the audience. So again, if the teacher is not taking into account this area of context of who her audience is, and she prepares a lesson on elementary math for high school seniors, that will be very redundant and very boring. And so she has to take into consideration who her audience is, so she can make sure that she reaches them in a way that's appropriate and a way that makes sense to them. In the middle picture, the area of context is going to be the purpose. And so he needs to make sure he's aware of what is his purpose for speaking. Oh, it's to celebrate the life of Ronald Reagan. And then lastly, the area of context is the setting. And so obviously, Abraham Lincoln was a big civil rights advocate. And so since Martin Luther King Jr. is giving a speech about civil rights, that would be a very meaningful setting, would be very useful to incorporate into his speech. And so that's a very important area of context for him to consider. So again, we kind of dabbled in a little bit of these as we've gone through class, but I really want us to dig a little deeper into all of them now. Obviously not all at once, but today we're just going to go through the purpose and the audience. Did I skip a slide? Oh, sorry. I skipped purpose because y'all already know the purposes. If you don't, go back to outlining. But our three purposes for speaking are to celebrate, to persuade, and to inform. And so for my freshmen, I go through those, but I don't really need to go through them for y'all. So we're going to skip straight to the audience. A shorter video. Wahoo! So, who is the audience? This is our second area of context. Speakers will use something called demographics to better understand their audience and how to relate to them. Demographics refer to information on selected characteristics of the population that can be used by the government or market researchers and speechwriters, like you guys, to appeal to an audience. So it's just taking selected characteristics of a group of people and using that to appeal to your audience. Basically, it's just changing the way that you talk to engage an audience with your message. It sounds like a stereotype, but it is not. A stereotype is a widely held but fixed and oversimplified image or idea of a particular person or thing. And it's often used in a negative way. Demographics are not supposed to be used in a negative way. So here are the main differences between a demographic and a stereotype. Demographics are fact-based and stereotypes are not. And demographics are used to appeal to an audience, and stereotypes are used to isolate and discriminate. There's always one student who tries to be like, well, yeah, but you can use a stereotype to like bond people together about how much you hate somebody. And I'm like, what's wrong with you? Why would you say that? So remember that we are ethical speakers and decent human beings, and so we're going to use demographics and not stereotypes. Here is a chart that has some of the more common demographic categories that you'll encounter. You'll see that these, for the most part, are fact based. So, like your income level, like that is a fact. Your education, like, okay, what degrees do you have? That is a fact. Your age, that is a fact. But a stereotype would be like the dumb jocks thing I mentioned earlier, or like, oh, all blondes are dumb. Like those would be stereotypes. And so those we use to isolate and to alienate, but we use demographics to understand like how our audience needs to be catered to, how we can speak to them in a way that they are going to appreciate and understand. And so they're very helpful for us as speech writers. One thing that I love to do when I consider who my audience is I like to consider how they learn. So as a teacher, I think this is something that we all could benefit from. But understanding our different learning styles is really, really valuable. So there are generally 3 different learning styles. There's also these additional 4 and 5 that I added in here. So if you're an auditory learner, think of okay, like audio, that's sound. So that means you probably learn the best by like hearing something. But if you're a visual learner, you're gonna learn the best by obviously visualizing or seeing something. But if you're a tactile and a kinesthetic learner, you learn the best by doing. And these just refer more to like left side of the brain and right side of the brain. And so for these 3, imagine like y'all can probably identify which one most teachers tend to gravitate towards. Most teachers, including me, honestly, we tend to prepare our lectures for auditory learners. But what about the poor visual learner and the poor kinesthetic learner? Like they need to see stuff, they need to do stuff. So what are they to do? And so, as speakers, we can take the opportunity to try and engage as many of the different learning styles as we can within our audience to try and make sure we're really engaging them with our content. So, what I would like for you to do is to pause the video and take this quiz, and it'll assess if you're auditory, visual, or kinesthetic learner. Some people get like a really high percentage of all 3, and that's totally fine because sometimes it depends on like the context of what kind of learning situation that you're in. Um, and then I'm going to post a worksheet on Google Classroom. Normally, I would just pass the worksheet out in class, but since we're not together, I'm just going to post it. And you can print it out if you would like to, or you can just see it on the computer and you can kind of mark it up that way. But that one will include, let me backtrack for a second. So this quiz you're going to take only talks about these 3 learning styles. And then this worksheet or this document I'm going to post has all 5 of them on there. And so that can be a kind of good weeding out process to see which of the ones you truly are. If you're more than one, that's totally fine. You should not be more than 2. I had a student like a year or 2 ago who was like, I'm all 5. And I was like, no, 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 you're probably not. But maybe you're just a really special kid. I don't know, but probably not. So take the quiz. Again, you can pause the video now and take it, or you can take it at the very end. Either one's fine with me. And you're not in my classroom, so don't put a tally mark on the board. Normally would in class to see kind of like who's a good mix of what. But I think it's just helpful for you to know on your own what kind of learning style you are. That changed my life in college when I figured out, oh, hey, I'm a visual learner. That's why I've been bombing all my classes. And then once I figured it out and I figured out how to study for visual learners, I started getting really good grades. So this is something helpful for you just in your everyday life, but also to see, okay, man, like there are a lot of different ways people learn, and that can help you prepare your content for your audience in that way. So once you figure out, okay, like who's my audience, what are some of their demographics, like maybe their age or biological sex, and you kind of think about learning styles, there's some different ways you want to, um, I guess, like incorporate that information about your audience into your speech. So you want to make use of your knowledge about your audience to enhance your ability to successfully appeal for them through content strategies. So content strategies is just like changing the content that you share to appeal to your audience. So if you complete the sentence, making use of your knowledge about an audience to enhance your ability to successfully appeal to them through the content that you share. So you want to identify with your audience, show that you can relate to them, that you understand them. You want to incorporate your knowledge of them into your speech. If you know people in the audience, you can recognize them by name, or you can talk about shared experience that you might have. You can choose appropriate and relevant examples, statistics, or testimonials for the speech, just because you know like what kind of stuff they're gonna agree with, what kind of content they're gonna relate with. So that can be a really important thing to know about your audience, is how to choose appropriate examples. You can also utilize organizational strategies. So again, completing the sentence, make use of your make use of your knowledge about an audience to enhance your ability to successfully appeal to them through the way you organize your content. And we've talked about organizational patterns before, so I won't harp on this too much. But this one's going to talk mostly about how, like, where to put your most important point. So when there's initial dissonance, or just kind of like distance, disagreement between you and the audience, put your strongest point first. This is because something called confirmation bias, and y'all probably already know a little bit about this. But basically, like, we seek out information that we already agree with pretty much. And so if someone goes on stage and they're giving a speech about something that I don't really agree with, I'm going to be a lot more inclined to just tune them out or not listen to them as soon as they say one thing that I don't agree with. So it's a tendency to interpret new information as evidence and a confirmation of our existing beliefs, and we discredit anything that goes against our existing beliefs. So if you're talking to an audience who's already pretty prone to disagree with you, then like go ahead and put your strongest point first, draw them in quickly and immediately, and then keep building your case from there. Don't try and like, oh, I'm gonna lure them in. No, like they're probably gonna tune you out at some point. So like put that strongest point first. However, on the other hand, if you have an audience that you know probably already agrees with you, or they're more prone to agree with you, or if you think you can create a strong sense of identification with them, then you can put the strongest point last. So, this is when you would build up to that most important point. You can enhance that emotional appeal, build up the excitement and the interest leading up to it. Um, so, if your audience is already probably going to agree with you, or if you can create a really strong sense of identity with them, put the strongest point last, build up to it, but do not build up to it if your audience is probably not going to agree with you, because they're probably going to tune you out. And that's all that we're going to go through for today. If you haven't already, read those 2 articles about context in the Bible, and then go figure out your learning style through that quiz and the document on Google Classroom, and we call The Ways We Learn. And then that is all for today. And I'll post another video on Thursday.